My name is Erica Goldman. I'm the Director of Program and Operations for JPRO Network. I'm so delighted to welcome you to our JPRO Online program today. I'm going to take just a quick minute to tell you, in case you don't know, that JPRO Network is the association of, by, and for the nearly 80,000 professionals who work for Jewish community organizations across the U.S. and Canada. We have all kinds of different programs and resources available to you. I'm going to spotlight just two right now. One is our program called Well Advised, which is free, online, confidential, one-hour advising sessions with a really wonderful slate of experienced people from our field that you can have a real objective conversation with. And right now that's available to anybody, whether you're JPRO members, whether your organization is JPRO affiliate or not. But the current round is closing soon. So if you're interested in signing up for a session, I recommend that you take advantage of that really quickly. I'm going to put the link to that in the chat for you. And I also want to mention that since the pandemic began, we've been running twice weekly Jewish meditation sessions. That the new round of those begins tomorrow. So if you are interested in Jewish meditation, they're going to be happening over the summer Thursday mornings at 11 o'clock Eastern, and then later in the summer Tuesday evenings also. So if you're interested in Jewish meditation with us, I'm going to put the link to that in the chat also. You are invited to join us for that as well. So there's a lot more going on at JPRO. You can look around the website and see what else there is, but I just wanted to call your attention to those two things. And I'm just so delighted to have the opportunity to learn with you today and to be together. And I'm so excited to turn things over to Sarah Goss, UpStart's Director of National Projects.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate that. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. So give me 1 second. I promise we won't be sharing screen the entire time, but I can see all of you, and I'm pretty sure y'all can see this. Yes, just got some nods and thumbs up. Fantastic. So hi, I'm Sarah Goss, and as Erica said, I'm the Director of National Projects at UpStart. I'm going to get to my role in a minute because you might be wondering, well, what is UpStart? What do y'all do? Well, every day we at UpStart partner with the Jewish community's boldest leaders, many of you here, to expand the picture of how Jews find meaning and how we come together. Whether someone is launching a new Jewish venture or reimagining what an existing one has to offer, that might be a JCC or a synagogue or a federation, UpStart provides them with the entrepreneurial tools and network they need to build the Jewish community of the future. So what do I do as Director of National Projects at UpStart? Well, I cultivate, design, facilitate, and manage entrepreneurial, organizational, and field building programs nationally, taking best practices from the business world, Silicon Valley, and nonprofit management. And we're gonna move on from my picture. So for today, we just had our opening and welcome. We're going to move into a warm-up activity next. And this is an interactive webinar, so we're going to send you into breakout rooms. We're going to ask you to type into the chat or give responses throughout. So be ready to speak or to type into the chat. Today, we will be introducing a conceptual framework. And if you'd like to apply it to a specific initiative, you'll have the opportunity to do that in the upcoming masterclass series. After the conceptual framework, we're going to hear from 2 case studies, which will be featuring Andrew Belenfant and Avram Mendel. And this will be followed up with a Q&A, AMA, Ask Me Anything portion of our time here together. And then we'll have closing and reflections. And I'm just going to check the chat because I just got something in. And yes, feel free to write hello, everyone, in the chat. So speaking of our warm-up, let's dig in. So before we begin, we're going to be sent into small breakout rooms of 3 to 4 people. Your group will have about 12 to 15 minutes total to first introduce yourselves, say your name, your role, your organization, and then I want you to reflect on and share your response to this prompt. We are going to use virtual visual explorer cards, and you're going to choose one image that resonates with this fill in the blank statement, this prompt. when I think of large challenges facing my organization in light of the pandemic, I feel. So take a moment first to think about that prompt, and then we're going to send in the chat both the link, and my chat disappeared. Oh wait, is it already in there? Ah, okay. So here is the link to the Visual Explorer cards. And thank you, Erica, for putting in the prompt as well. So Erica's going to send us into our breakout rooms, and we'll have a chance to get to know other people on this call. See y'all in a few.
All right, great, here we go. If you are just on the phone, I just want to mention, sometimes you get stuck in mute and you don't know how to get out. The secret code is *6. If you're on the phone and you find yourself in the room muted, press *6 and you'll be able to unmute yourself.
I learn something new every day.
You said about 12 minutes, Sarah, right?
Yeah.
All righty, here we go.
I love seeing so many names and people from all over the country. Hi, Ezra Shankin, all the way from Canada, Vancouver, New York, UJ days. Oh, so many. Laura, Danielle Alexander from Houston, Sarah Weinreb in Colorado. So many great faces and so many new faces. Erica, is everyone back from breakout rooms? All right, awesome. So I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen, and I promise I won't be doing this the entire time. Welcome back, everyone. So challenges with a capital C underlined, can be hairy and, as the name implies, quite challenging. By having a structure to lead the process, we are able to commit to a framework of understanding, executing, and bringing others, whether that's important stakeholders, staff, lay leaders, our board, whoever else, along on the journey with us. First and foremost, we should not be on autopilot and make all of our programs virtual and throw them into the ether of the internet. That's too easy. It's not user-centered. It adds to the virtual noise, especially when we're all feeling Zoom fatigue, as we're on Zoom. But who's feeling Zoom fatigue right now in month 4 or 5 of pandemic? Yeah, I see some hands being raised. So for our purposes today, and which the masterclass will explore, we're going to be using a 3D framework. We're going to diagnose your challenge, we're going to determine your response, and we're going to design for change, our 3 Ds. So let's dive into those. First, diagnosing your challenge. So this is the first step before jumping into problem-solving mode. It's really to take a step back and reflect on and evaluate your organization's measuring stick. When I say measuring stick, this might mean your mission and vision, your theory of change, your organizational goals, objectives, or key results. It could be your team metrics. Or if your organization doesn't have any of those, perhaps your personal benchmarks in your role. I know that was a lot of jargon. It was a lot of jargon and lingo, but ultimately, what are your organization's goals and impact? You want to mitigate risk by using this as your anchor. It should be at the center of your process to ensure you're moving in the right direction. Now, in evaluating your challenges, do they actually map to and align with your organization's ultimate impact? Or are these challenges too outside or left field for the impact you're trying to make? To be clear, also, sometimes we choose our challenges, and sometimes they choose us. Like a pandemic, or an economic crisis or recession, or other situations that are beyond our control. How we approach them is key. Our response has to align with our impact, because as we all know, resources like our budget and staff capacity are really precious, even more so right now. So in the chat, type in and send what your organization's ultimate goals and impact are. And for some reason, I keep losing the chat. There we go. Continued sense of community, awesome. Addressing the needs of the residents. Training youth to be the next generation of civil rights leaders. Ooh. Increase participation and engagement in Jewish education. Supporting your grantees as things shift. Supporting Jewish education in all its forms. Wow, wow. So many great responses here. Serving the most vulnerable in the community, engagement and relationship building, providing professional resources for everyone who works for a Jewish organization. Love that. Letting your staff know you care about them during and after the pandemic. It's great to have that at the center. Connecting and building Jewish identity in our youth, sorry about that. Right, as an example, Megan, I'll go with yours. Connecting and building Jewish identity in our youth. So if your core mission is about that, if your core goals and impact is about building identity in our youth, you might not focus on, well, what are we doing for the parents? Because that's a secondary audience. It's not your primary audience. So really focusing on, well, how are you building Jewish identity in your youth? And it might not also include, well, what are the kind of social programs that we provide them, but rather a focus on education or connection to Jewish values in a way that matches with that generation and how they see Jewish values. So it's really honing in on our impact and goals and not veering from that. And thank you everyone else for contributing to that. Okay, I'm gonna go to the second part of our 3D framework. So for this, you might be wondering, okay, Sarah, where's the opportunity? How do we get there? The opportunity lies in where the challenge sits. So first, let's get clear on terms here. And our terms are gonna be goals, strategy, and tactics. I'm going to use a couple of examples first. So, who has played Monopoly? I can only see like 5 of y'all at a time. Yes, all right, people are raising their hands. For Monopoly, the goal of Monopoly is to win, right? It's to win, to have all the money. A strategy for Monopoly might be owning all of the real estate so that as others pass by, they have to pay. And your tactics are then to buy specific real estate on the board. That's one specific strategy. I know people are competitive. People have different strategies for it, but that's one way to win the game. And going off this game metaphor, let's also look at soccer. So for soccer, again, the ultimate goal is to win the game. How do you win the game? By scoring goals. Well, then your team is going to have specific strategies for how to make those goals, how to get those goals and win the game. And within that, the tactics are the individual actions. This player is going to do this. They're going to pass the ball to that person. That player is going to be hanging out on that side of the field. Individual actions that lead to this strategy to make goals and ultimately win the game. So in other words, the goals are the ultimate impact you're trying to make. The strategy is the overall plan that leads to tactical action. And then your tactics are individual actions to reach desired goals. That strategy, that middle layer, it ladders up to goals and ladders down to tactics. And I want to be clear when we talk about change or pivot or tweak, that those identify with specific parts of goals, strategy, tactics. So here, for goals, you can change your goals completely. For strategy, you might pivot your strategy and have a different type of strategy, but the goals are still the same. And then the tactics are the small individual actions that you tweak along the way, but still getting to that same strategy that ladders up to those goals. So I want to be clear about these terms. Sorry, I'm moving my window. Be clear about these terms as we talk about changing or shifting or pivoting. What does that look like? What does that mean when we use these terms? And spoiler alert, our 2 cases today will predominantly focus on how they shifted their strategy to meet their participants' needs while still meeting their larger vision for impact. And because they shifted their strategy, they have a whole new set of tactics to achieve that strategy and their overall goals. Okay, so now that we're clear on terms, let's go to the last part of this 3D framework. Once we know the challenge and the opportunity, we design for either the change, pivot, or tweak we want to execute. And none of us work in silos, so we must think about the stakeholders involved in the process and design for them. This part is clutch. This is how we're gonna implement. This is how we're gonna execute. So with that, the first reality of implementing change are interwoven challenges. There's the technical versus adaptive piece. Technical is teaching for knowledge and skills. As an example, that might mean for your organization, getting all of your team working remotely from home, if that was new for your organization. Many of you have probably experienced that back in March and April, once we were forced to shelter in place. The difference with an adaptive challenge is that is a change in behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs. It's very different from giving someone a skill set, but they have to change their attitudes and behaviors in order to execute on that. So those are two very different things to take into account and design for. We also have lots of people with different needs, goals, and stakes, because at the end of the day, change equals loss, and you have to manage around that. Additionally, a huge piece of this is current staff capacity, especially if your organization has staff who've been put on furlough or laid off, and we're still trying to get the same amount of work done with a smaller, condensed staff. And lastly, authority versus leadership. We have varying levels of authority. Those are the people who are the decision makers and can say, give the okay to make certain decisions or execute on certain plans, which is different from desires of leadership. That being said, in this moment, people are able to plug in ways that didn't exist a few months ago. And in fact, this is a perfect moment for people to get creative and experiment within and outside of their role in lead, and for organizations to do that too. So recap, we're not working on autopilot and moving everything to virtual for the sake of doing it virtually. Rather, we're coping with what's been stripped away and subtracted and redesigning. We're determining the essential ingredients so that we can still focus on our ultimate impact in the community. And now we're going to move into case studies. And then what you're really here for in the organizations that can talk us through what they were able to do. I'm super excited to showcase these organizations and these two individual leaders who have approached their work with a curious mindset and a bias towards action during this pandemic that still leads to their ultimate vision. So they're going to share with us their ultimate goals and impact they were aiming for, and most importantly, how they got there. What was their roadmap and what did they learn? One note for logistics, please hold your questions. Again, we're going to have a Q&A, AMA portion after the case studies present, and we can ask them questions. So in the meantime, write down your questions as they come up. And I'm really excited to hear from Andrew Belenfant, the Director of Engagement at JDC and Twine, and Avram Mendel, Executive Director and Founder of Tzedek America. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see their faces as we speak and have a conversation together. So first, let's meet Andrew. And prior to COVID, Andrew's byline read, or part of his byline read, he travels the world connecting global Jews and building awareness around humanitarian aid and disaster relief work. Andrew still builds awareness, but clearly in this moment, it's not through travel. Andrew, can you tell us more about you, your role at JDC and Twine, and the mission and vision for JDC, even though I just gave a bit of a spoiler?
I would be happy to, Sarah. First of all, I'm really just grateful to be here and to see so many faces and to engage in this learning with you. So Andrew Belenfant, like Sarah said, thank you very much for the lovely introduction. I would say in terms of the line around what it means to actually bring people to immerse global communities and immerse them in the experience of learning. Obviously the physical work of that has changed in significant ways. We're not traveling at all anymore. And we canceled and paused all of that work. But I would say the work, and this goes to some of your points earlier about mission, we don't actually see that our mission has changed at all. Really what we're trying to do is inspire action and really engage and catalyze a generation of young adults to see and live and lead a life of action with global Jewish responsibility at the core of that. And so part of the work here was actually figuring out how we still deliver on that mission, even though the delivery methods were changing. And so that's the first response to your question.
Awesome, I love it. And yeah, clearly your challenge was you had to meet that mission without being able to offer trips, and travel wasn't the impact, and it was taken off the table. So I love that y'all really went back to your anchor, your measuring stick of, well, what is it we're trying to do? We're trying to build these global citizens and connect communities, and it doesn't always have to be with the strategy of travel. So how did you determine your response during this once the pandemic hit? Where did y'all go?
Say it again?
Where did y'all go?
Where did we all go?
There's my Texas.
Yeah, where did we all go? We all stayed home. I think what's important here is we've built part of our organizational framework and strategy has been to say, like you noted before, that that traveling to these global communities and even doing local events in cities in North America, in the UK, and in Israel really became part of our identity. And I think it's what we're known for and what people saw. And so I think part of the challenge here, and this gets to some of your earlier question, is like what happens when your identity is challenged, not just the set of things that you do and try to accomplish, but the thing that you're known for is the thing that is what you're limited on doing. And so part of this was actually really thinking again, doubling down on that mission and really figuring out what that mission was. And again, I'll just name Entwine's mission as part of the larger JDC, which is the leading humanitarian organization in the world and working in over 70 countries, is to catalyze a generation of young adults to actually do this work with us. And part of what we see our mission to them is to reframe and affirm their values around what does global Jewish service mean? What does it mean to be in mutual relationship with other Jews globally? And so part of the response there, to answer your question, is really thinking about, let's actually move quickly. I think for us, it was really important that we canceled everything up front and we didn't do things piecemeal, and that we said, if we know our mission is X, let's get to delivering that mission in the way that we can right now without wasting any more time. And I don't say that in a negative or a pejorative way. I say that in actually a really positive way. What it allowed us to do was to take opportunities for folks and deliver them in a totally different way. And I think a lot of people did this pivot that we all keep hearing. This word is like the buzzword of the pandemic pivot. We did that really quickly, and we upfront, even within the first week of March, we canceled all of our programs through August. And then within a month or two of that, we canceled all of our programs through 2020. And we said, like, everything is stopping. And I think pivoting is a choice, obviously. You have to decide if that's the right choice for you. We could have stopped all of our programs and not added anything to the plate. What I think became really important and what the opportunity was around what would it look like to deliver this mission differently. And I think there are two things that I would just underscore that are really important. And I might be getting to some of your other questions. I know we had a pre-conversation, so sorry if I'm jumping ahead.
Totally fine. It's a conversation we're having with everyone.
Okay, great. So one thing I'll just underscore is that we felt pretty early on, every crisis is an opportunity. There are so many things we've talked about doing for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, digital engagement, virtual learning opportunities, one-on-one engagement over Zoom, that we finally actually had an opportunity to do. We were really busy. There was staff capacity. We were all traveling all over the world. To get an opportunity to pause is one that doesn't come very often. And so for us, we used that, the crisis or the pivot as a moment of opportunity, not as a moment to focus on what we canceled. And the other thing I'll say is, because we had wanted to do those things for so long and we're finally getting the opportunity to do them now, part of what we're thinking about in the current moment is how do we leverage all the stuff that we're creating for the future, so that we're not actually creating this stuff and living in a vacuum of this moment in time, but really thinking about what does it mean to leverage all of these opportunities. And then when we go back to turning on our trips and events and our local opportunities, we'll also have virtual engagement opportunities for people. And we can reach our people in deeper ways. We can engage with them more. We can do more interesting things with us. We can give them, differentiated learning models and opportunities to engage with global Jewish responsibility. The opportunities are endless there, really.
Awesome. I love that. I love the focus on the things that y'all had been thinking about for so long, but it wasn't your primary focus as an organization. And now this moment really lent itself to say, actually, those projects we were thinking about would be perfect for now. We know they already align with our mission. And it'll be both baked into your DNA as an organization. And we still don't know what the world will look like 18 months from now, for better, for worse. So you'll still be able to have those offerings. I'd love to have everyone hear more about what were the different types of offerings y'all created for your users, and what were those specific pivots that you made? What are you offering now?
Great. Really good question, and I can share some of that stuff. I think a few things I'll say is, first of all, more virtual engagement, like I noted. Second thing, investing in programming that we can leverage later. And then the third thing, like I noted, also going to come out of this with more programs for our alumni. And the other thing I'll note is that one thing that became really important for us was actually one-on-one engagement, not just programmatic engagement. And the piece I'll note there in terms of the specific program was that all alumni who have traveled with us globally between now and 2014, so back about 6 years, has gotten personal outreach from a staff person and had a conversation with a staff person. So we've reached out to every single one. Obviously, we didn't hear back from every single person, but reached out individually to over 2,000 alumni, and I've had to date some one-on-one interaction with over 250 of them in the last couple of months even. And part of that was actually us saying, part of our work is teaching people to engage around this idea of mutual responsibility and engagement with other people. How can we as an organization put people at the center of our work? And how can we really show them that we value them and be there for them in these times? What the other piece I'll say here to answer your question, we tried to think about what would the guiding principles be around how we do the work. And so the three that I'll call out that we really narrowed down to after all sort of the bigger context that I shared, was that anything we create right now has to be relevant. So for example, it doesn't have to be about COVID-19, but it can't ignore that that's what's going on in the world. So even those one-on-one conversations came out of an idea that people might feel lonely right now, and we actually need to reach out to them and see how they're doing.
Can't relate at all. Cannot relate at all.
Exactly, yeah. The second value, so the first one was relevance. It has to be relevant to the moment. The second one was around everything having to be community-centered. So what are the ways in which we create and gather community? One of the things that came out of that was that we've done trip reunions for trips that have gone out again from 2014 to today. And then in addition, we've actually highlighted global communities that are impacted by COVID that we already did our work in. And we had people who've traveled to those places and people who haven't traveled to those places learn on what we're calling Entwine exclusives, webinar style programs where they can zoom in, metaphorically and literally zoom in to those communities and learn about what's happening in those places that they care so much about and that they have value around. So relevance, community-centered, and the third one I'll note is unique access. We can't ignore the fact that the JDC is an 106-year-old organization that's worked in 70-something countries. And so part of what we thought we in particular could offer was unique global access. And so everything that we've created has come through the lens of looking at global communities, learning about global communities, doing cooking classes that were inspired by a recipe from a global community or from someone's family's heritage. There are things like that. And we've done everything from webinars to cooking classes, like I mentioned. We have a podcast that's running right now. We ran giving circles where we highlighted 4 communities where JDC does its work, and people got a chance to choose where they wanted to pool their money to make a gift, a collective impact gift. And we had over 80 people join the first 2 of those giving circles and donated over $20,000 to a few different global communities that are being impacted by Corona. It's been pretty incredible.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you had shared with me your upcoming Insider Morocco trip. I think it was 10 hours over 5 days. And like you said, what would it look like to cook with someone who's local from that community?
Yes, thank you for not letting me forget the virtual Insider trip to Morocco, which is starting in next week.
Right, and what I think is so great is you didn't just try to move a trip to virtual, but we're thinking very thoughtfully, who is our user from the participant side and also the user from the communities. And what you at least had shared with me prior to today was you're also thinking about these communities and how they're impacted by COVID. And I think that's hugely important to think about your resources. At the end of the day, we're all experiencing this pandemic in some form of trauma or in another way. And so what are you asking of this community while still maintaining, can we build these global connections? And one other thing too, I really like to shout it out, were the films that y'all created. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, I can. So part of one of our strategic initiatives that we've done to advance our mission is to give people DIY toolkits so that they can bring global Jewish values into their homes. And so we have a number of these DIY toolkits, the Global Shabbat toolkit. We have a global Passover toolkit, which some people may have seen, called Reordered. And typically we've delivered those physically. They're physical boxes that you can order and get. Obviously, we're not spending time in our office or packing packages or using a mail service right now for a number of reasons related to COVID. But we thought, one of the things we thought pretty specifically about was how we could pivot those things to be digital opportunities. And so one of the ones that we had been working on before, but we lit a fire under and completely transformed to the digital spaces, the Films from the Field toolkit, which gives people an opportunity to watch a movie about a global community, and then you get supplemental resources to learn about that community, learn about JDC's work in that community. There are discussion guides and popcorn recipes, so you can gather with friends over Zoom or when we're back together physically, you can gather physically and talk about the movie. And for a lot of alumni, that was also a really important thing to have as a tool they could use, because then they could also add their own story of what they're experiencing in those places where they've been to those communities. And so I'm happy to share with folks the Films from the Field toolkit in the chat.
Yeah, definitely. And we're gonna send links in the follow-up emails, in the follow-up email as well, so everyone has access and can scope this out. Cool. What is probably on everyone's mind that I think people are probably itching to know is, one, what were the upsides, like gaining something beyond retaining and engaging current participants? Were there any hidden benefits or silver lining in this new strategy? Yeah,
the one thing I'll say, I said this, but I would underscore it, especially for a group of Jewish professionals who are like-minded folks who I feel in so much community with right now. And so thank you all for being a part of this work. One thing we heard pretty loud and clear, to the extent that this is helpful to people, from our alumni, was that most of the places that they feel in community with organizationally were places that they felt were trying to get them to join a program and didn't necessarily feel that the organization was trying to understand what they were going through at that time. And so those one-on-one outreaches and those one-on-one calls, I cannot tell you how many alumni said to us very specifically, wow, thank you so much for reaching out. It's so nice to have a conversation with you. And I think for us to be able to connect with our people and sort of go back to our roots, so to speak, in terms of who's actually participating and what is meaningful to them or what values resonate with them, that was really powerful for us as a learning. And I think also powerful for them to be able to connect with someone they may have traveled with or someone that they have a relationship with.
Totally. Absolutely, for them to be seen, validated, heard, and for y'all to do this discovery process to either find out, are we on the right track, and is this confirming what we want to plan, or actually this is what we're hearing from them, and maybe the tactics or even the strategy we're trying to do isn't really meeting their needs. We, as in royal we, humans tend to skip over that to just execute, go, and figure out logistics, when really at the beginning it's go slow a little bit to find out and make sure that you're meeting your users where they're at. And then we can hit the gas and execute. Yeah. I'm going to ask, on the flip side, what were the downsides of this strategy shift? Because I bet people are wondering about that too.
Yeah, I said this a little bit in the beginning. Our identity is so closely linked to the work we do in global communities. And so I think there's a lot of disappointment and a lot of loss that you have to reckon with when your flagship programs are paused in that way. So I think there has been some pain there, some discomfort, certainly. And there's also this other piece where it's this is the right thing to be doing right now so that we can get back to the work that we do. And on top of that, like I said before, every opportunity we've taken advantage of right now is one that we're going to be able to leverage for the future. There's nothing we're creating right now that lives in the vacuum of COVID, but rather it's deeper and more engagement with our people so that when we turn back on, we have even more, a larger set of opportunities that people can engage with. And so, you know, everything has two sides. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Right. And right. It reminds me of the phrase like kill your darlings, not the best phrase, but in this moment of we have this thing that we are so attached to and we have fidelity to, and it's hard to manage loss around that because at the end of the day, change equals loss. And that goes both internally for staff, especially if it's what they've dedicated their career or this role is dedicated to, and also externally with all of your participants. And you have to be willing to let go, figure out what is sacred, what you want to keep from that, and how to manage and hold people through that process, because there's going to be some grieving with it.
Yeah.
My very last question for you is anything else that you've learned along the way, or how have you iterated?
One thing that I find to be interesting actually is that the field pieces around this, the way that we connect and twine folks to the larger JDC community, like there's so much relationship that's not even between us as a staff or us as community builders with our participants. That certainly exists in a really deep and meaningful way. But some of the people who have reached out are really, they really want to know what JDC is doing in the global communities and how JDC is working, or connecting with people they've met on the trip, like the country director in Morocco, or the tour guide that they met in India. You know, there's people are really eager to connect with those people and to understand what's going on for them. And for us, that's like, you know, that touches our hearts in the deepest of ways, because part of what we're trying to do, like I said, is catalyze this generation of people to care about other global citizens and care about other Jews in the world, and say global Jewish responsibility is my responsibility. And so the fact that they're activating around that right now, actually, like it's been a refreshing piece of all of this, to be honest.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's a great discovery, and to figure out, well, now how do we redesign or tweak our tactics in order to fit that narrative and what they're trying to do. And that's to say nothing is set in stone.
Yeah, I think especially in times like these, and in all times, you have to be willing to say what's working and what's not, and what can I create now that I've learned what I've learned from the surveys, or from talking to the users, or from visiting the communities, or whatever it is. It's been fun actually for us it's felt fast paced, and there have been challenges, of course, but it's been really nice.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing.
Thank you.
It was so great to hear from you. And again, I'm going to remind everyone, hold your questions, because we're going to talk with Avram. And then we'll do Q&A, AMA after we hear from Avram for the both of them. So thank you,
Sarah.
Avram, our second case study, we're going to hear from Avram Mendel, Executive Director and founder of Tzedek America, which transforms lives, strengthens Jewish identity, and changes the world through immersive social justice-oriented experiences. I'm really excited to hear from Avram, who usually is based in LA, but right now is sort of in the Bay Area on the road in California. Avram, will you tell us more about Tzedek America's mission, ultimate impact, and your challenge in the face of this pandemic?
Sure. I just want to make sure you can hear me, because I'm using my phone for audio.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks. Could everybody smile for me just for 1 second? Could you, everybody on the call, just smile for me, like as a favor? Thank you. Because you're all in your little zone. So it just brings me a little positive energy. Great. Awesome. Thank you. I could continue. So Tzedek America does immersive social justice programming. We engage Jewish teenagers and young adults through immersive programming. We have multi-day trip programs to Guatemala. Groups come to Los Angeles. We study economic justice in Las Vegas. We build houses in Appalachia and Eastern Kentucky. And then we have one-day experiences in Los Angeles where we work with ages 12 to 21. So on our one-day experiences in Los Angeles, we study immigration justice, food justice, environmental justice, racial justice. And last year we worked with over 2,000 teenagers, and this year we are on track to work with 3,500 teenagers. So obviously all that has paused during the pandemic. And when this first hit, like, we didn't have to cancel our trips. Our trips were canceled because people said we're not going to obviously be doing that work. And so what I'm going to try to do I think what we do is very interesting and exciting, but I also want to be able to speak in a way that you can kind of see yourselves in our shoes so you can think about your own organizations. And so I also want to give a shout out to my colleague Sandy, who's my team member with Aesthetic America, who's also on the call, who's been a really great partner to me. We're 6 years old, so that's different than JDC, which is 106. Was that right, Andrew? You got 100
It beat
years
you by
on
100 years. Yeah.
And so what we initially did was, what is our obligation as an organization? So, we engage Jewish teenagers and young adults in their Judaism through immersive social justice programming, but we also work with a lot of nonprofits. We have over 30 nonprofits in our network that we partner with. So especially at the very beginning of COVID, we were thinking, how can we support our nonprofit partners? Not what can we do for us, but what can we do for others? And so we reached out to all of our nonprofit partners saying, what do you need? And they needed anything from money to gift cards to laptops to chicken feed. And we created lists of things they needed and sent those out to our networks and got our networks to help donate to those nonprofits. And that was received very well by our constituents as well as, of course, the nonprofits. Then the second thing we did, go ahead.
I was going to say, in one way you had described this to me was, what are our gifts to give the world? And I love that you weren't thinking about, well, what are we going to do for just our participants and making big asks of the organizations you partner with, but rather, what do they need and how can we support them? And then we'll figure it out and make it work. Keep going.
I think what are your gifts that you give to the world are like that, especially at the beginning, like that's what everybody was doing. Not everybody, but that's where my focus was on the musicians that were giving free concerts, the Indigo Girls saying, hey, let's bring joy to the people in the world, or Wendy Mack from the Bay Area, who's an artist who's doing free art classes for kids, or PBS that was streaming cartoons and children's television 24 hours a day because they know parents did not know what to do. So I think like a lot of people were doing that. Like, what are our gifts to give to the world first? And your gifts, and the way we looked at our gifts is what do we have an abundance of, right? And so, like, what do we have to offer already without going out? So I was using the metaphor of what's in your refrigerator. So when you're making dinner, right, you can go to a menu, you can go to a recipe and look at the recipe and then say, do I have these things? Then you can go out and buy those things. Or you can look at your refrigerator and say, what's in there and what meal can I make from the things in my refrigerator and my pantry? And so that's kind of what we did. We looked in our refrigerator and said, what do we have to offer? Who are the people in our network? What are our skills and our specialties? So, we're experts in working with teenagers and teaching them. So I reached out to every synagogue in our network saying, can we do free Zoom classes for your teenagers on how they can get involved in social action? It went really well. So usually we have like 5-hour to 5-day experiences. And so this was like me connecting with teenagers I didn't know for an hour, and creating a lesson plan on Zoom. I can't just rely on me being like funny. I have to have like PowerPoint presentations and video clips. And it's like a lot more work than just being in front of people.
Yeah.
And that went really well. And also, I learned a lot from that.
What did you
experience.
learn?
I learned that it can't just be me, because I think the first one, I was just trying to have it just be me. So like finding the right YouTube video, calling on people, creating polling, and learning the Zoom technology, all of those things that we've all been learning, but really like forcing myself very early to learn it. And then another thing that we can do is, inspire teenagers, just as Andrew was trying to inspire people to be global citizens. Our goal is to help Jewish Americans combine their Jewish values with their American citizenship so that we can, make this country the best that it can be and have that be inspired by Jewish values. And so we created a social media campaign to encourage Jewish teenagers to get involved in social action from their homes. And we came up with a list of ideas, and we released them, I think once a week, once a day, I can't remember, one a day. And also in our network is Mayim Bialik, who is an actress and has a big social media following, and she helped us by reposting, and our social media campaign had over 300,000 engagements and over 200 shares. So, like it was huge. And many people started to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and people were doing the things we were challenging them to do. So if you go to our Facebook page, which is just facebook.com/Tzedek America, you can see the social media campaign that was so successful.
Something
and
something you had shared with me too when we had this conversation was, yes, you initially were reaching out to synagogues and offering to host a session for their teens, whether it's Sunday school or whatever their kind of religious Hebrew high school was. And you had shared, okay, this is great, I'm getting traction, but it's this one class of, 20 students. And part of your evolution was being pushed to think, how can we go bigger? How can we have larger numbers? That then led to having this social media campaign and getting 300,000 views and however many actions that these teens did across the country, to even where your program is now with the series that you're offering. As a quick spoiler.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. I think we're like, this is just slow, like you don't have the answer right away. Like you just slowly, like, I think, like I remember the Avenue Q song, when you help others, you can't help helping yourself, right? And I think that's where we started. We helped others, and then that started to help us clarify who we were and what we do. And Sandy, my teammate, also is really good at pushing me to say, like, what is Tzedek America about and why are we here? And so another thing that we did was we gathered Jewish teen educators and African-American teen educators together to talk about how they're educating their teens about in the wake of George Floyd. And that was a really powerful session on both parts. And that's what we do. We convene people. We help elevate the voices of people who aren't elevated. So we just kept looking for ways to do that. And then that led to a board meeting, which I just came to the board very proudly saying, hey, I know what we should do. We should have a teen fellowship this summer, because so many summer camps aren't in session for teenagers and they'll want something to do. And my board said, how many teens do you think you can get? And I was like, I don't know, 20 or 30. And they said, that's not enough. How are you going to reach 3,000 teens? How are you going to reach 30,000 teens? To which I immediately sunk in my chair and my face turned white. Because, you have your board telling you to do something that you can't just go no to. And
they were encouraging you to think bigger and wider.
It's great to have that kind of board. I feel very blessed to do that. to have that. And so then we ended up creating a program which is going to be a interactive digital webinar on 10 different social justice topics throughout the year, supporting, currently it's designed to support religious schools and independent Jewish teenagers that are not part of organizations who are interested in exploring their Judaism and social justice. And I created that program in partnership with 20 educators around the country. So I wrote up a skeleton, and then I sent it to Ian Candell of BBYO. I sent it to Nicole Zimmerman in New York City. I sent it to like 6 different local Jewish educators. I sent it to an educator in Chicago. And just like, I'd love your feedback. And just being really open to feedback and criticism, that is one of my strengths. Like, except when it talks to like,
Can confirm. I can confirm that.
Right. Unless it's from my wife, I'm really good at getting constructive criticism and feedback. So, and then we developed this program based on people's needs. And we're hoping to have 500 teenagers on a Sunday once a month with affinity groups broken out in between each session if teenagers really care about those sessions. And we're creating a program that's a combination of the Ellen DeGeneres show meets a really engaging TED Talk.
Love that. Ellen DeGeneres meets TED Talk. And that's amazing. I love that evolution of what did you try out, what was working and what didn't exactly work, and how can we tweak our tactics or even pivot part of our strategy to still get to this ultimate goal of wanting to reach a large audience and really creating these teens who feel like they're citizens and are attached to racial and economic and social justice in this country, and having that be your North Star for what you're trying to provide, since your trips are canceled. I am curious to hear too, throughout this process, and this is a question I asked Andrew as well, what were the hidden benefits or silver linings, and were there any downsides to this?
I mean, the downside is we were 65% revenue and 35% donation, which is an awesome place for a nonprofit to be.
Yeah.
Except when there's no revenue.
Right.
Right. And foundations were like, oh, that's so amazing. We always are telling our nonprofits to become more revenue based, and it's great that you are. But now so we don't have huge grants. There's nobody. We have no foundations supporting us. And not only that, the 2 places where we were getting funding are not giving us funding next year. That's the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles PK-12 program is designating all their money to COVID relief. And another foundation is designating all their money to COVID relief. And we applied for a huge grant from the Cutting Edge Foundation, and they totally just paused and stopped communicating with us. So, not with us personally, just like, everybody's scrambling and not figuring out what to do. So we are trying to bring in revenue with our program, but it won't be anywhere near what we brought in.
For sure. With
our trip model. And so the downside is, now it's a disadvantage. It's a disadvantage to be revenue based. But I didn't really think about the money. It's like, why do we exist? And what is our mission? Let's just keep plowing forward. If we're going to exist, we shouldn't exist just to raise money. We should be existing to do our mission. So that's what and hopefully the money will follow. But I'm an entrepreneur. I started making $0 my first year. After making over $100,000 as a synagogue professional, I went to 0. Then my second year, I made 36. I got to tell you, when you go from 0 to 36, it feels huge. So this is where we are, and this is why we exist. If we want to stop existing, then we stop existing. But if we're going to exist, we should do our mission and figure out the money second. Yeah. That's my opinion. And in terms of what the blessing is, we can engage now 3,000 teenagers across the United States live. And we can have any guest speaker we want. So from Mayim Bialik to the head of the NAACP for Baltimore City, to State Representative Alma Hernandez in Tucson. Like we can have anybody we want and connect teenagers to people that they wouldn't normally have access to. This could lead to a new program. Like even after the pandemic, people might still want this. This could lead to people falling in love with Tzedek America and wanting us to lead trips in the future, back when travel is possible. Those are all possible outcomes, but like if that could be a blessing to follow, but we don't know. But right now we're focusing on it. We're focusing our creative energy on something very exciting. And I think that's what like everybody needs to be doing. Like you got to get excited about what you're doing, or else it feels like a burden and just you're bored putting one more thing.
Yeah. And what I find so interesting too is there are definitely common themes and connections between JDC and Twine and Tzedek America, even though you have very different users, different audiences, different participants, but also the infrastructure and support that you have. You know, JDC is a much larger and older organization. Tzedek America, you were a 3-person team and you happen to become a 2-person team a month before the pandemic. So really in designing for change, it's a 2-person team that you leaned on for, to be able to create these new programs to engage users, new users, or past participants who have you know, been on any of your programs or even past partners.
And just one more thing. I just want to say that we love collaborating. So first of all, I'm a cohort 11 UpStart fellow graduate. So I reached out to my cohort, my UpStart people, and asked for help. Like you got to ask for help, and you can't have shame in that. And they were extremely helpful in suggesting funding sources, and they have all kinds of specialists that will walk you through things. And I reached out to Repair the World in New York City saying, is this something you're interested in? I reached out to Jewish Education Project and said, is this something you're interested in? And you just gotta like, you know, take a shot of vodka or tequila or whiskey and then make the phone call or make the whiskey or write the email. And so your inhibitions are lowered. That's why my apologies to anybody who doesn't drink, but sometimes my inhibitions are up and I'm, what if they say no? Who am I? I'm just a little guy. So you got to get past that. And if they say no, then you're in the exact same place you were.
I appreciate that too, of looking in the fridge, what do we have, but we might need a condiment from another partner organization to complement what we're doing. I want to move into the question and answer in AMA because I'm sure people are tired of hearing my voice. And I want to say thank you both to Andrew and Avram for doing this panel case study. So friendly reminder, please use the chat to send in your questions for Andrew and or Avram. We ask that these questions be applicable to any of the participants on this call. So if you have something specific, we'll be staying on a few minutes afterwards and can answer your question then, but hold off on that for right now. And while you submit your questions via chat, I'm going to ask the first question. So looking back, Andrew or Avram, what would you have done differently? Even though hindsight is 20/20, what would you have done differently?
Sarah, that's a tough one.
Sorry.
Are you asking us to look back, like if we had known COVID was coming?
Ooh, no, I think I'm going a little bit smaller. I think we all would have wished had we known if COVID was coming, but a little bit smaller of looking back in the last like 3 months, what would you have done differently in executing and redesigning in order to still, you know, meet your ultimate impact?
It's a good question. I think to your point and to like the framework for the session, sticking true to your mission is actually one of the best things you can do for people, because even when circumstances change, what they see from you is that you're true to your brand and your identity and what you deliver. And so I think like, I don't know that I would make massive changes to any of our responses, but I would like remind ourselves in those early days, like don't go away from your mission. Like what you do is what you're what you're equipped to do. It's what your people expect from you. It's what you're the expert at, and there's a reason you do that work. And so everything has to come through that lens, which I said before, but I think like a reminder of that like 3 days earlier would have saved us like 3 days of brainstorming.
That's totally fair. You still got there, but yeah. And I like the term of what are you an expert at, and what are we great at, and let's keep that as our core focus.
So what I would do differently is just try not to panic, which obviously I did early on, which I think many of us did, and say like, you know, this is an opportunity, and where do the opportunities lie? And you were an entrepreneur, you figured it out at the beginning. We had just finalized our pivot from 3 years ago. We went from a gap year program to this trip model, and then now we're pivoting again. But remind yourself, like, you have the ability, you're capable, you're strong, and you'll be able to come out of this just like you've come out of other challenging moments. Because I think we need to hear it from others, but we also need to tell it to ourselves.
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, I forgot about that y'all made that pivot a couple of years ago. And here you are pivoting again in light of this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, does anyone else have questions that you want to send in the chat that you're thinking of and curious and want to ask Avram and Andrew? Okay. Well, if we don't have...
I wanted to say another like piece of advice that I have. It's not advice, but like I have a cheerleader. I have several cheerleaders. One is my board chair. And you know, you guys are in it, you're working harder, you're balancing family life with work life. And you're doing hard work, and you're probably working harder than you were before COVID in a lot of ways. So it's important to find one other person who can be a cheerleader for you.
Yeah.
Because that's, you know, it's hard to do it yourself.
Yeah, be a cheerleader and be a great thought partner too, to kind of test out, oh, this is what I'm thinking, and how does this, you know, again, how does this measure up to what our ultimate impact is? I want to say thank you. Thank you so much to the two of you for telling us about your organizations pre-COVID, what it's been like during COVID, and where y'all are at right now. And again, we're going to stay on for a few more minutes, and people can continue to ask questions. I'm going to turn it back to Erica to give us some info, and then we'll do closing reflections so we don't end on logistics.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, Andrew and Avram. Everybody, I'm so excited. This is sort of the first time that we've done this kind of tie-in. I'm really excited. We're announcing at this moment for the first time a new masterclass that we're going to be doing with Sarah. That's directly your chance to dive into the entrepreneurial framework she's been talking about here, and that these two case studies were examples of the 3D framework. Diagnose, determine, design.
You got
so if you're interested in that, you can sign up for this JPRO Masterclass. JPRO Masterclasses are, you know, a few weeks in a row, smaller groups, really interactive, sometimes with a little bit of homework to really dive into the topic itself. So I'm putting the link in the chat, and this is also something we've never done before. If you're on this call, you can register with a special discount code, which we're not going to say out loud, so even people seeing the video don't get to use the codes. But if you use the codes that my colleague Robin just put in the chat, they're good for 20% off of the registration price. So click the link to check out the masterclass itself, which you see is called Designing for Change. Designing for Change during COVID-19 and beyond. And when you click the link to register, whether you're a member of JPRO or not, there's a discount code that you can put in for 20% off. So we're really hoping to see a lot of you in that course as well. And you can really take the sort of theoretical ideas here and learn how to really apply them to your own organizations, your own situations, and whatever the challenges that you feel that you're facing in this moment. So spread the word about the class happening. Keep the secret code for yourself. Be in touch if you have any other questions. You can write directly to me, Erica@jpro.org, for anything else about the class or other JPRO things. And I'm going to say one more time, thank you. This has been so wonderful and great to dive in deep, get high up, see an example, talk about it theoretically again, look at the examples, what a delightful hour plus with you. And I'm going to turn it back to Sarah to sort of close us out.
Amazing. Thanks, Erica. So nice to have a discount too. I hope to see many of you for this masterclass. I am not going to share my screen, but I'm going to put 2 questions in here for us to do some reflections. Before we close out and say goodbye, utilizing the chat, answer one of the following questions. What is one aha you had today? Or what is one thing you're excited to take back to your team? What is one aha you had today? And what is one thing you're excited to take back to your team? And while you think about that, I again want to say thank you to Erica, thank you to Avram, thank you to Andrew so much. And if you're interested in exploring this further, sign up for the masterclass. And each one of those masterclasses is a 3-part series. Each one will focus on one piece of that 3D framework. Yes, I love Avram's fridge analogy. I'm totally using that now. It's definitely a helpful approach. Thanks, Sarah, for adding that. Yes, don't panic. Take time to think, importance of flexibility. We will get through this. Focusing in on what you're an expert at, what you're known for, absolutely. Moving forward, yes, definitely. Bias towards action is key. Just start putting things out there. You'll get information and good feedback along the way, and then you can always tweak your tactics as you go along. Encourage staff, they are not alone. What are our gifts to give the world? Yeah, thinking about impact on people on the ground and in addition to the participants, your travelers. And creating programs with lasting value. Yeah. Ooh, compassionate leadership. Amazing. And if you want to keep adding to the chat, you totally can. And Robin just put in the code too for the masterclass. Yeah, and relationships are critical to the holy work we are doing. Thank you everyone so much. We're going to hang out for a few minutes. And if you don't want to hang out, you have the gift of time, 9 minutes to enjoy before your next meeting. So thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Take care.
Bye.